In my first video, we talked about the first and second food revolutions. The first was the invention of knives, which changed our diets in a way that allowed us to grow bigger brains, and so much so that we became an entirely new species. That new species, Homo erectus, became so smart that they learned how to control fire and invent cooking, which must have led to the invention of storytelling. Fire, cooking, and storytelling taken together constitute the second food revolution, which was key to our becoming yet another species, the Homo sapiens sapiens that we are today. As this playlist progresses, we're going to see that story play out over and over again with just slightly different details. And that's exactly the point of the original message of this channel. Every time we humans change the way we eat, we change who we are at a fundamental level. And the two are inextricable. You can't change the food without changing the people, and you can't change the people unless you change the food. You make the food, and then the food makes you. We make the food, and then the food makes us. The third food revolution is one you might already know about, the agricultural revolution, sometimes interchangeably referred to as the Neolithic revolution. That term might seem a bit haughty, but it's important if you want to understand what people mean when they talk about paleo or primal diets and lifestyles. You see, the paleo diet refers to the era just before the agricultural revolution. That era was the Paleolithic, meaning old Stone Age. Paleo meaning old, and lithic meaning stone. The invention of agriculture ushered in the Neolithic age, meaning the new Stone Age. And in case you haven't noticed, there's a lot of argument about how those paleo people ate. Now, what we can and should all agree on is that the invention of agriculture changed absolutely everything. Some for the better and some for the not better. Another thing we can all agree on is that Eat is Love swag is awesome, and I'm going to prove it by giving away this mug. Just stay tuned and I'll tell you how. And if you'd like to have an unfair advantage for winning future giveaways, hit the notification icon so that you'll always be among the first to know when I've published a new video. So you can swoop in, type in the magic word, and get your thing. Now, I want to point out that the Neolithic revolution was not a monolithic revolution. If you took a Western Civ class, you might have left with the impression that 10,000-ish years ago, someone in modern-day Iraq invented the plow and suddenly civilization was born. But what happened there in what is now Iraq, in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, also happened in China. It happened in India. It happened in Peru. It happened in Mesoamerica. And when you look at the big time picture, it happened kind of close to the same time. But it wasn't all at once. Planting came first. Planting came before irrigation, meaning that for a long time, the vagaries of the rivers governed everything. And as we'll see, raising livestock, money, writing, laws, vocational specialization, all happened in interwoven succession. And with one exception, each time a civilization was born, it had a species of grass as its centerpiece: wheat, millet, maize, rice, and the only exception is the Incan potato. But the Incan civilization is exceptional and remarkable in so many ways, more ways than I could possibly account for in this video. Literally gajillions of really long books have been written on this subject, and there are equally numerous well-made documentaries here on YouTube, right down to the exact gajillion. So I'm going to try and fit this into something succinct and on topic, so forgive me if I oversimplify. The first civilized thing we humans ever did was to drop some seeds on the ground and then notice that they turned into plants. The places where we spat out our seeds one year had more of that plant the following year. So we started planting things on purpose, dropping some seeds and then coming back next year to harvest our food. It worked so well that eventually we started planting lots and lots and lots of seeds, and we noticed that the seeds planted near the rivers made way more food. And then someone had the brilliant notion that if we planted enough seeds in one place, we could pretty much stay in that one place and stop wandering around. Well, as long as we're going to stay in one place, we might as well build some dwellings, so let's get to it, Pruitt. And being fond of one another as we are, we built our dwellings close together. And those clusters of villages became cities, and we started living closer together in larger numbers. Hunting and gathering requires about 5,000 acres to support one individual, whereas early farming only needed about 1 acre per person. So, living closer together, we needed to start agreeing on how to live close together. And even that came down to the food, because for the first time in our history, maybe for the first time in Earth's history, we were able to make more food than we needed. Not every year and not every farmer, but some farmers in some years had extra food. That meant that some people had more than others. That also means that some people used that part of the brain that enables us to lie to claim that someone else's food was theirs. So we had to make up rules about who owned the extra food. And we had to keep track of who owned the extra food, and that's why we invented writing. We also had to come up with new ways to store the extra food, so we invented basket making and pottery. We also found out what happened when the extra grains got wet and sat for a while because they turned into booze. And we also learned that we could grow bigger cities farther away from the rivers by digging ditches and inventing irrigation. We also learned that concentrating so many people into such a little space led to disease, crime, wealth inequality, usury, social status, politics, and the invention of vocations that were not directly related to the production of food. Again, for the first time in human history. If you didn't want to be a farmer, maybe you could be a clothier, or a priest, or a lawmaker, or a weaver, or a potter, or a merchant, or maybe you went into the so-called oldest profession. Is it really the oldest? I don't know. I'm not even going to imagine. But if you're using your imagine, by now you might have noticed that another thing developed here. A new concept. An awareness of what belongs to one person versus what belongs to the community. A concept of public versus private. And that concept is still the fundamental issue behind many, if not most, political disagreements today. And it's often the very exact same question. Who owns the water? There was a saying in the Old West that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And that's still so true today. Before long, people are living in cities and eating a lot of bread. Bread might actually predate agriculture, possibly going back 14,000 years, though that was basically just gruel made of crushed grains and water set on hot stones by the fire and eventually kind of breading up. Not exactly a boule, but bread was a mixed bag. Boule, boule, boule. It's one of those words that there's no way to say it without sounding pretentious. Why did I even put that in the script? I could take it out, but then I wouldn't have this little bit to make fun of myself with. Oh my God, am I bullying myself? I hope I'm not a bully. I hate bullies. I hate stupid people. Why do I turn black and white when I'm thinking to myself? Why does my voice sound weird? We live in an interesting world. I mean, like starfish. Starfish are so freaking weird. I mean, are they even a fish anyway? I mean, seriously, what are they? Oh wait, I'm supposed to be talking about bread. Bood. 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 Oh. On one hand, bread was calorically dense. It would keep for a relatively long time. It could be traded easily. It could get you through otherwise lean times, and it smelled so good. On the other hand, it was, nutritionally speaking, a fast burn carbohydrate. In other words, it gets in your bloodstream, spikes your insulin, causes a bit of inflammation, and then any calories that you don't burn right away turn into fat and stress out your liver. Now, there's no evidence I know of that Neolithic people suffered from obesity or metabolic syndrome, but it is safe to say that the old hunter-gatherer diet was vastly superior, with its diversity of plants and game meats, meaning it was loaded with polyphenols, pigments, and phytochemicals, and vitamins, and healthy fats, and balanced proteins. So the farmers ate a less nutritious diet, but they were also far less likely to starve. And this channel is far less likely to starve if you can do a couple of free and easy things that don't cost you a penny. If you could find it in your very human heart to like and subscribe and, wow, even share. Oh, that would be oh so civilized of you, because in a way, we're exactly like those early Neolithic farmers who invented agriculture because we're We're exactly like them because, if nothing else, because I don't know. I got nothing. Just hit the like button, and because I'm nice, and I'll tell you about why those early farmers were really smart. You see, the folks who embraced the agrarian way of life and became farmers enjoyed a much more stable and safe way of life. Not only did they have a secure, reliable, and predictable supply of food, albeit occasionally interrupted by droughts, floods, infestation, and other challenges, including raids, but they actually had a surplus, and that enabled them to invent things like commerce, writing, pottery, architecture, astronomy, math, laws, and, well, pretty much everything that's been invented in the last 10,000 years. But there were trade-offs. For one, the farming way of life took a toll on the body. The lower protein intake meant less muscle mass. Stooping over in fields all day did a number on one's skeletal health. They got less cardio. A diet less variegated meant nutritional deficits and all the things that come with that, like rickets and bad teeth. Comparatively, the people who continued the old lifeways were more athletic and looked like it. They were braver. Their stories of harvesting food that fights back were much more interesting. But that lifeway is fickle. Sometimes you just can't find the food and you get hungry. Really, really hungry. So you go visit your cousins on the farm. They look at you like rock stars with your sinewy bodies, your tall, confident postures, your good teeth, and your exciting stories of hunting in faraway places. And so they're happy to feed you because while you eat, they can gaze upon your shiny muscles and listen to your stories. Didn't we all know this person in college, the one who never really grew up? They showed up at your place and charmed everyone while they helped themselves to the beer and the food. And then what happened? I mean, at first it was cool because they were fun to hang out with, but after a while, it got old, right? And at some point you had to have the talk. They couldn't keep sleeping on your couch and eating your food and drinking your beer. And how did that go? Not so well. And if there were substance and addiction issues involved, it got rageful. Well, there's nothing more addictive than food. So imagine being a Neolithic farmer towering at 5'2" and having the talk with your Paleo distant cousin and telling him he can't keep coming over, eating your food and seducing your women. So how do you suppose that went? Not so well. And now some of them probably did agree to assimilate. Some of them wanted to assimilate. Some may have found that they could be really useful as warriors. Some may have worked out trade agreements where they would bring meat to pay for the grain. And some of them, though, just plain didn't fit in. And some of them may have gone on to form new tribes, and those tribes may have had a certain rivalry with the farmer tribes. And there's some archaeologists who have pieced some similar stories together, but for now, I'll just plant these seeds in your imagination and let you daydream on it. Suffice to say that we can time travel 10,000 years forward, and now there are people selling books on how to replicate the diet of those hunter-gatherers. Now, given that there's some disagreement among them, it's probably fair to say that some of them may be getting a few things wrong. One big mistake would be to assume the Paleo people ate mostly meat. And I should point out that the true Paleo diet is omnivorous. It's not carnivorous. That's a mistake. I'd imagine that old hunter-gatherers mostly ate the foods that didn't run away. Now, one group of people whose lifeway hasn't changed too much since that time are the Hadzabe. And boy, can we learn a lot from them. The Hadzabe still live near the cradle of humanity and still practice a hunter-gatherer lifeway that may not have changed all that much in the last 10,000 years. And one of their staple foods comes from the baobab tree, which can live for thousands of years. And while they do hunt from time to time, most of their diet comes from plants, which provide about 100 grams per day of fiber. That's about 10 times that of the average American. They also eat a fair amount of honey when it's in season. Wild honey, unlike the processed commercial stuff, contains fat and protein. The Hadzabe eat a seasonal diet that is incredibly supportive of their gut microbiome. Theirs has about double the number of species as most Westerners. And when it comes to gut biome, the more species, the better. The Hadzabe also boast a near absence of heart disease, autoimmune disease, IBS, cancer, and other chronic diseases. Okay, but getting back to that oldest profession thing, I just want to point out before I forget that the first vocation was the person whose job it was to mark the vessels of surplus food to keep everybody in the up and up. In other words, the oldest profession is that of food writer, which is kind of ironic because it was born at the exact same moment as the food industry. Oh, the ironing. Well, anyway, in the words of Arlo Guthrie, I'm not proud or tired. Now, if you're really paying attention, you might have noticed a trend, and that trend is grass. The human gut cannot digest blades of grass. The only way early humans could get calories from grass was to eat the animals that ate grass. Those animals, by the way, are called ruminants, and they include, among others, cattle and sheep. They have a 4-chambered stomach that allows them to basically ferment grass in their gut. When we invented the knife, remember knife? Well, that gave us even more access to calories from grass because we could eat more of those ruminants. Now, as I mentioned earlier, almost every civilization was based on a species of grass, whether that be wheat, rice, corn, or millet. We found that by cooking the seeds, we were able to get calories directly out of the grass. You could almost say that grass is the foundation of civilization. Almost. So here's my question for you. Should we do an entire episode on grass? The first person to state their opinion in the comments will win this piece of swag. It doesn't matter if you think we should or shouldn't do an episode on grass. Just state your opinion, and I'll send you the cup. I'll even pick up the shipping because I'm not above bribing people to watch my channel. Yeah, I have to buy my friends. Anyway, I promised that we would talk about the advent of domesticated livestock, but it turns out we don't really have time. So let's make that its own episode too. One chestnut I'll leave you with for now is that almost all domestic edible terrestrial livestock originate from 5 species: goat, sheep, cattle, chicken, pigs, and in some parts of the world, horses. There are reasons for that. Oh, and ducks and guinea pigs, if you like koi. Anyway, there's so much in here, so let's sum up. For the first couple 100,000-ish years of our existence, we were hunter-gatherer nomads who spent pretty much our entire waking lives finding food and chewing food. Compared to modern people, we worked harder for less food, whereas now we work less hard for more food. And that comes with its own set of problems, but we'll get to that. When we started planting food on purpose about 10,000-ish years ago, that led to villages. Villages became cities. Cities needed craftspeople, so it became possible to make a living doing things besides harvesting food, so the economy was born. We invented laws and politicians and priests and prostitutes and scribes, and here's a good one, calendars. Calendars to tell us when to plant, though much of the time only priests were allowed to use the calendar so that they could appear to have magic powers. In short, this was the birth of civilization. And now more than half of humans live in cities. So we invented math and astronomy and trade and irrigation and organized armies, the concept of property, communal assets, contracts, social stratification, haves and have-nots, clothes surplus, crime, and even the very notion of truth itself. And it wouldn't have never happened except that we stayed in one place and planted a nice farm together. And it's so nice that you and I have spent this time together here on the Eat Is Love TV channel. I'm so looking forward to our conversations in the comments. I really appreciate you. I'll see you next time. Ciao.